In 1979, China was one of the poorest countries on earth, with a per capita income of just $150 and 800 million people living in desperate poverty. Today, China is the world's largest economy on a purchasing power basis, having grown at an average of 9.5% annually for 4 straight decades. This is the fastest sustained economic expansion any major country has ever achieved in the entire recorded history of human civilization. But the most shocking part of this story is not how fast China grew. It is who actually paid for that growth without realizing it. The answer is America. The United States of America, China's biggest rival and most vocal critic, is the single most important reason China became an economic superpower. American consumers bought Chinese products, American companies built Chinese factories, and American investors funded Chinese expansion for 40 straight years continuously. China did not build its economy despite America. It built its economy almost entirely because of America and America's own decisions. To understand how this happened, you need to go back to 1972 when President Nixon made his historic visit to China, changing everything permanently. Nixon opened diplomatic relations with China for one simple strategic reason. He wanted to use China against the Soviet Union during the Cold War. America needed China as an ally, and China needed American technology investment and market access to modernize its backward economy. This single geopolitical decision would go on to have the most profound economic consequences of the entire 20th century. The real economic story began in 1979 when Deng Xiaoping took power and launched China's economic reform program that would shock the entire world. Deng made a decision that contradicted everything Communist China had stood for since Mao Zedong took power in 1949 completely. He opened China's doors to foreign investment and market competition, telling his people it does not matter if a cat is black or white, so long as it catches mice. This one philosophical shift from pure communism toward what he called socialism with Chinese characteristics changed everything about China's economic future permanently. American corporations were the first to rush into China, seeing an opportunity that was almost too good to be real or believable. A country with 1 billion people willing to work for wages 1/20th of what American workers earned was an irresistible proposition for any profit-seeking company. Nike moved its shoe manufacturing to China. Apple moved its electronics assembly to China. Walmart sourced its entire product range from Chinese factories at prices American consumers had never seen before. Every major American corporation eventually followed, creating the manufacturing base that would power China's extraordinary rise. The scale of American corporate investment in China over the following decades was absolutely staggering in its size and impact. By 2001, when China joined the World Trade Organization, American companies had already invested hundreds of billions of dollars building Chinese factories, training Chinese workers, and transferring American manufacturing expertise. China joining the WTO was the moment that truly accelerated everything because it gave Chinese products preferential access to every market in the developed world simultaneously. American consumers were now legally required to treat Chinese goods the same as goods from any other country, removing all remaining barriers. What happened next was one of the greatest wealth transfers in human history, from American workers to Chinese factories and then to Chinese economic development. American manufacturing jobs disappeared at a rate that stunned economists, politicians, and workers across the entire United States simultaneously. Between 2001 and 2011, America lost over 2 million manufacturing jobs, directly attributable to Chinese competition, according to research by economists David Autor and colleagues. These were not just jobs. They were entire communities, entire regions, and entire ways of life that simply ceased to exist in America. But while American workers were losing their jobs, something extraordinary was happening on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. China was using the money earned from those American purchases to build the most ambitious infrastructure program any country had ever attempted in modern history. Highways, railways, airports, ports, and power plants were being built at a speed and scale that left Western observers completely speechless and astonished. China built more infrastructure in 30 years than America had built in its entire 250-year history as a nation. The money flowing into China from American consumers was so enormous that China accumulated the largest foreign exchange reserves any country had ever held in history. By the mid-2000s, China was sitting on over $1 trillion in foreign exchange reserves, and the number kept growing every single year without stopping. China decided to use much of this money to buy something that would give it enormous strategic power over the United States directly. It bought American government debt, United States Treasury bonds, making China America's largest foreign creditor almost overnight. This is perhaps the most extraordinary irony in the history of global economics, and it deserves a moment to fully appreciate. American consumers bought cheap Chinese goods. That money went to Chinese factories. China used it to buy American government debt. America used that borrowed money to give consumers tax cuts. Consumers used the tax cuts to buy more cheap Chinese goods. This was a perfect circular financial system where America funded China's rise and China funded America's spending simultaneously in a loop that benefited both, but ultimately transformed China more permanently. China also did something with American investment that American companies never anticipated or planned for when they first entered the Chinese market. Every foreign company that wanted to operate in China was required to form a joint venture with a Chinese partner company sharing technology and expertise openly. American companies thought they were getting cheap labor. China was actually getting free technology transfer worth hundreds of billions of dollars from the world's most innovative economy. Within 2 decades, Chinese companies had learned enough from their American partners to begin competing directly against them in global markets everywhere. The technology transfer went even further than joint ventures through a systematic program that American officials describe as the greatest theft of intellectual property in human history. Chinese intelligence services targeted American companies, universities, and government agencies, stealing trade secrets, research, and technological innovations worth trillions of dollars over several decades. The FBI has described China's economic espionage program as representing the most significant threat to American economic security ever seen by law enforcement officials. America was essentially funding China's rise through legitimate investment and then watching China accelerate that rise through illegitimate means simultaneously. By 2010, it was becoming clear to American economists and politicians that something had gone badly wrong with the strategy of engaging China economically. The theory had been that economic prosperity would lead China toward democracy and make it a responsible partner in the international order. Instead, China had used economic growth to strengthen Communist Party control, build a massive military, and challenge American dominance in Asia and globally. The engagement strategy that was supposed to transform China had instead transformed the balance of global power in ways America had never intended or desired. Donald Trump became the first American president to directly confront this reality when he launched a trade war against China in 2018, imposing tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars of Chinese goods. Trump argued that China had been cheating systematically for decades using American money technology and market access to build an economy that now threatened American primacy globally. The trade war continued under Biden and has intensified further under Trump's second term in 2025 and 2026, with tariffs reaching historic levels between the two largest economies on Earth. But by this point, the damage from America's perspective was already done. China had already become an economic superpower. Today, China's economy, measured by purchasing power parity, is the largest on Earth, having surpassed the United States by this measure in the mid-2000s. China produces 30% of the world's manufacturing output, controls critical supply chains for electronics, solar panels, and rare earth materials essential for modern technology. Chinese companies like Huawei, BYD, and Alibaba now compete directly against American companies for global market dominance in every major sector. The country that America helped build is now America's most formidable economic competitor, and the competition is intensifying every single year. The lesson this story teaches about money power and economic strategy is one of the most important geopolitical financial lessons of the modern era. Good intentions in economics do not always produce good outcomes. America genuinely believed engagement would make China more like America. Instead, China took American money technology and market access and used all three to build a system that challenges everything America represents on the world stage. Understanding how this happened is essential for anyone who wants to understand how global power and money actually work in the real world. For ordinary people watching this story unfold, the implications are very direct and very personal in their daily financial lives. The cheap products that filled American and Western homes for 4 decades came at the hidden cost of millions of manufacturing jobs and entire industrial communities. The inflation that Western consumers face today is partly the result of supply chains being disrupted as America tries to rebuild manufacturing capacity it gave away over 40 years. And the geopolitical tensions between America and China that dominate headlines today will affect investment markets, interest rates, and economic stability for decades to come. The most powerful financial insight from China's rise is actually very simple and applies at every level from nations to individuals directly. Whoever controls manufacturing controls wealth. And America chose consumption over production for 4 decades, thinking it could always stay ahead through innovation alone. China understood that the foundation of lasting economic power is making things, and it used American money to become the world's factory while America became the world's biggest customer. This fundamental shift in who makes things and who buys them is the defining economic story of our entire generation. Understanding why China rose and what it means for global markets gives you an enormous advantage in making smart financial decisions going forward. The U.S.-China rivalry will reshape supply chains, investment flows, currency values, and economic opportunities for the next several decades at minimum. Investors who understand this dynamic can position themselves to benefit from the restructuring of the global economy rather than being caught off guard by its consequences. This is why understanding economic history is not just intellectually interesting. It is financially essential for protecting and growing your own wealth. If this video gave you a completely new understanding of how global economic power actually shifts, please subscribe to Empire and Money right now. We bring you these extraordinary stories of money power and economic transformation every single week in clear, simple terms anyone can understand and apply. The people who understand how wealth and power move between nations are always the ones best positioned to protect and grow their own money. See you in the next one.